Bruce Flanagan, and I'm the host of The Buzz on Media and Marketing. So welcome to the show. Today I have Eric from FB&C. Welcome, Eric.
Welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So we're just going to ask a few questions and have a conversation together.
Okay.
So tell us about Eric.
Eric is somebody who arrived in Vietnam 3 years ago, came from Paris, where I was the editor-in-chief of France 24, the digital division of the big international French news network.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I was in Los Angeles, where I ran the largest Asian language TV station in terms of ran news and production in Vietnamese, Korean, Chinese, and a little bit of Filipino.
Okay.
Prior to that, it's been a journey through the alphabet soup of the major news networks. BBC, CNN for 5 years. I was a foreign correspondent in China for the BBC World Service. AP in Tokyo, CNBC in Singapore. Produced dramas and soap operas in the Congo. So a little bit, so we've been in a lot of different places.
Been all over the globe.
But 6 months after getting in Vietnam, my wife told me, said, "That's it, we're staying here, we're not going anywhere."
Okay.
She loves it so much here,
Wow.
so we're staying put now.
Great. Excellent. Where are you from?
From the U.S., from California.
Okay.
Grew up, though, partially in France.
Uh-huh.
Also grew up speaking Chinese.
Okay.
So
grew up speaking Chinese.
Yeah, started Chinese very early on, and then it's kind of like an obsession in life, So now, some men may have girlfriends in every port of call that they go to. I've got Chinese teachers wherever I go. So, and the two are not actually mixed.
Yeah, sure.
But I do Chinese class 3 times a week on Skype now for the past 5 years. My teacher's in Xi'an, and you have to kind of keep it up if you're going to want to use it. And so I've been doing Chinese and working in China and things around China for basically since I was 15 years old.
Okay, but your family name is?
Swedish.
Swedish.
And I've got a Swedish wife, and my son speaks Swedish and English, so we're a little bit of a polyglot.
Yeah, you're weird.
We are weird.
Great. So, what brought you to Vietnam then?
The opportunity at FB&C. So FB&C is a channel that's been on the market for 5 years. It launched in 2009.
Okay.
It launched at the height of the boom, when, from what I hear, I wasn't here, but they tell me that it was raining money, and there was money in the streets. The trees were growing money, and you could just pull it off the street. It's so easy to make money back in 2009.
I must have been indoors.
Apparently, that's what they tell me. It was the good old days.
Okay.
Then we had the crash.
Yeah.
And at the time, at 2009, there was a lot of TV channels that were launching, and so FB&C was part of that kind of explosion in media choices, which has been a part of a bigger trend of media growth here in this country.
Sure.
But it kind of ran into some difficulties, in part because the market had changed. What people wanted from television and from financial news had changed.
Right.
In the go-go times, it was great. It was easy. Everybody would turn on the TV, tell me what stock to invest in, and I'll do it, and I want to make money. Well, it got more difficult after 2009.
Yes.
So the channel ran into some difficulties, and so then as part of the B or C round of investment, international management was brought in. And that's where I was brought in to kind of help rethink the channel, help kind of redevelop it, reposition it, and that's what we've been doing now.
Right, okay, so you came because of an opportunity.
I came because I was invited to help lead FB&C.
Beautiful. So tell me a bit, well, you just told us a little bit about FB&C, but who are they, what do they do?
Sure. FB&C is one of a very small number of non-entertainment channels in the Vietnamese television market. The Vietnamese television market profile is very, very similar to that of other developing countries.
Right.
So in contrast to what most Westerners or those coming from advanced economies will think of television, or the cable system, for example, where there's a mix of program content, a mix of channels. You've got sports, you've got weather, you've got entertainment, you've got children's programming. You really have a wide array of choice. Well, in Vietnam, like in many developing countries, you don't have that. And you have basically 90% of the channels here are all entertainment channels, dramas.
Yes.
And that's in part because the advertising structure here is focused on fast-moving consumer goods.
Right.
And fast-moving consumer goods tend to target homemakers, domestic entertainment, and so you have the correlation between the content and the advertising.
Wow.
So we sit outside of that. And that's both an opportunity and a challenge.
Right.
The opportunity is that, well, we're one of only a handful of what I call kind of serious content, news, documentaries, talk shows, things like that. People who want a alternative to entertainment.
Right.
We know that the Vietnamese demand is not just dramas and entertainment. And how we know that is that if you look at what ComScore ranks the top 25 websites, News is well populated. VN
Right.
Express, 24H, Cafe F. These are all very big websites
Right.
listed in the top 25, top 100 of the rankings. So there's a demand for serious content.
Right.
So the problem is there a market for it? Is there a business for it?
Right.
So on TV, the business right now is driven largely by entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
News has not been a major category, but
For making money.
But we believe there's an opportunity there.
Okay.
We believe that with better execution, with more relevant content that people actually want, not simply replicating styles and formats from other countries that may not be applicable here,
Right.
we can serve that market.
Right.
The other thing that's going to change the game is that VTV itself, the mother church, is going to be launching a 24-hour news channel in the coming. They say it's going to be this year, but it may be next year.
Right.
And I'm very excited about that because I think it will draw more attention to the news market. It will draw more attention to, again, this alternative forms of programming.
Right.
And it really starts to show the maturation of the Vietnamese market, the content market here, is that it's moving beyond just dramas. It's
Right.
going to start to follow the trend that other emerging markets also followed, to move beyond just one form of content,
Right.
to expand the advertising base,
Sure.
to expand the viewership.
Sure. So what's the what kind of content? What's the character of FBNC?
So we went from being stocks, bonds, and finance, which was your traditional, when you think of business television, that's what you
Right.
think of. You think Bloomberg, you think CNBC. The problem here in Vietnam is that, for the most part, people don't follow the stock markets the same way
Okay.
that people in other countries do.
Yeah.
There isn't, there isn't a day trading culture that's here. The average person doesn't have necessarily their retirement tied up in the stock
Okay.
markets the way we would in the West, and
Yeah.
that's what's kind of built up the CNBC and the Bloomberg brands.
Right.
Is that even the everyday guy had some connection to the stock market,
Right.
because he either had a pension or retirement, or in
Right.
the U.S. a 401k. So there was some interest in it beyond just the professional class.
Yes.
Well, here it doesn't really go beyond the professional class.
And there's not a lot of them.
It's a very small market, so you can't build a programming strategy around a professional class of investors because it's just not enough.
Yes.
Bloomberg and CNBC have been able to do that, but I would even argue that Bloomberg TV by itself is not viable. Bloomberg
Right.
TV is only viable because it's got this giant terminal business that kind of subsidizes it.
Right.
So even that, there's not a large enough audience
Sure.
for.
Sure.
CNBC is another good example. CNBC doesn't generate any ratings in the US, Europe, or here in Asia. They make the vast bulk of their money off of licensing and sponsorships, but it's not a
Right.
ratings-driven business.
Right.
So
And events.
and events and speeches and events, and they too are part of big conglomerates where one division subsidizes another. So CNBC
Right.
US
Sure.
subsidizes CNBC Asia and
Right.
vice versa. So business news is a tough place to be no matter where you are.
Right.
So what I decided to do was to broaden the programming matrix out beyond just a professional class, and really understanding that in Vietnam there's one topic more than almost anything else that people obsess about, love to talk about, think about, strive for. Whether you're rich or poor, north or south, east or west, countryside, urban, male, female, there's one thing that unites this wonderful country.
Right. Money.
Money. But money in that everyday way, the way that you
Right.
can touch it, the way
Yes.
that you can, in terms of starting up businesses and having multiple jobs, and tapping into this amazing entrepreneurial spirit that exists in this
Right.
country.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Across all levels. And again, it's amazing. It's from the countryside to the cities, from the peasant to the prime minister.
Yeah.
Everybody's
Sure.
thinking about 5 things at once.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to kind of zero in on.
Right.
It's that space of that energy and that enthusiasm for entrepreneurialism, for trying to make yourself better in this world.
So money around, how do I make more and hold on to it, and what do I do with it?
There's a couple different ways: how to earn it, how to save it, how to spend it, how to grow it, how to invest it for your children.
Right.
So we start to look at what the research tells us about how Vietnamese people use their money.
Right. Okay.
One of the largest expenditures for people is their children's education. Almost some 40% of
Yeah.
savings are allocated for education.
Right.
So that, to me, is an opportunity. So we've launched an education show, an education
Right.
investment show,
Right.
teaching people how to best spend their money for their children's education, but not only for their children. Because one of the other parts what makes this, again, such a wonderful country is how young people want to advance themselves. They
Yes.
want to take a course in English. They want to take a
Yes.
course in finance. What makes sense in terms of spending money what's the ROI on that course?
Yeah.
So we're focusing on education quite a bit. Technology is another way. So we have a new tech show that kind of launched in 2014, but instead of being a tech show about what Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft are doing, we're doing a show about what people here in Ho Chi Minh City and in Hanoi and in Da Nang and in Hue are doing with technology. So really about Vietnamese tech, startups, entrepreneurialism, also kind of adapting the global tech trends to what's happening here, how people are using technology here. So we try and put every piece of content through our filter. And our filter is, how can I use it? How can I touch it? How can I access it to make the content more accessible for people, rather than this ethereal stocks, bonds, and finance and what happened on the Forex markets in Singapore. Nobody really cares. I mean, let's just be honest. Nobody cares.
Right, okay. Yeah. So who's watching FBNC?
Well, we have two main demographics, and we did we commissioned Nielsen last year to help us figure this out. So Nielsen went out, did both qualitative and quantitative research. We held focus groups, and it revealed something that was very exciting for me, because typically when we think of business news, the word that you often hear is the businessman. Okay. And I've officially banned that word at FBNC. So no one is allowed to say the word businessman.
Right.
Because businessman implies, one, male. 25% of all entrepreneurs in Vietnam are female.
Sure.
Women traditionally run the roost here when it comes to managing businesses. I mean, you look in the markets. Who's in charge of the cash?
Right. The women.
It's women. So women play an incredibly important role in family finances and in business finance. And I felt that they were being underserved in terms of content that's focused towards them. So we banned the word businessman.
Right.
So number one. The audience breakdown is in two. One, we have this older affluent. This is our premium viewer. This is the traditional business television viewer. This is the same viewer that CNBC, Bloomberg have, or Sky News have in the West or in other markets around the world. These are people more accustomed to watching television. They enjoy watching television. They like that sit-back experience, something they've been doing for 20 years. They also like a longer format type of display. They're not necessarily, they're staying on top of what they've got on their device and what's the web. They're scanning. A lot of them are professionals, but at the end of the day, television is very familiar and comfortable. Very similar to newspaper. It's the same kind of core audience there. That's a very good audience for us, in part because that audience, particularly here in Vietnam, is among the most affluent of the country. So that's the 1% or the 5% of the population that can afford a premium car, a premium phone. They can travel overseas. They can travel overseas for health. And that's a great audience for us, and that's one of the main kind of drivers of our advertising strategy. The second, and this is the more exciting part, is the aspirational, the young aspirational. This is what Nielsen kind of came in. There's a lot of them, and that's where the growth is.
Right.
So one of the things I first did when I came to Vietnam for the job interview, and I spent the day at FBNC, and after the day they said, well, what do you think? So I go on to the whiteboard and I draw a triangle. And I say, you've got a very big problem. And I put at the top of the triangle, I said, these are old people, and then I put, this is where FBNC is serving. The bottom of the triangle, the base of it, young people, and this is not where FBNC is. The problem is, if we only cater to the top of the triangle, that market stays very, very small. The advertisers want to reach the base of that triangle. This vibrant, dynamic, young population that's just bursting with energy, bursting with ideas, and wants to improve itself. It's the same market that advertisers, a lot of brands, want to lock into. Because the buying decisions they make in their 20s, they will hold with them for a long time. Or we want to put in their minds that, this Audi you cannot afford today, or this BMW you cannot afford today, or this, airline you can't afford to take today. But boy, you're going to work your butt off to get on that. And to get that plane.
And the time period's actually fairly getting shorter, right?
It is getting shorter. So people are moving from, the going from D to C to B to A is getting shorter. Getting to A is still difficult. There's no two ways about it. We're in a difficult market now, so the movement has been more difficult for people. Salaries haven't been going up as fast as people would want them to.
But that entrepreneurial side, not relying on a salary, but going out and making it happen.
And that's why the part of the market that I'm most excited about is that young aspirational, that 25 to 35, maybe 40, who really wants to advance. And so they're tuning into FBNC for high quality content. And that's something that's also very important. We differentiate ourselves in the market because we produce all our own content.
Right.
We don't outsource it. We don't rebroadcast other people's. We produce it. We have a team of experienced journalists, and we differentiate. And what we hear is that a lot of people go onto the big portal sites. A lot of people will kind of look elsewhere, and it's just kind of copy paste from other sources.
Sure.
And so the fact that we're creating original content with with our own MCs and our own journalists, and we're responsive to the market
Sure.
in terms of what people want and to find out what's relevant for them, they get excited about that. So we've adapted, for example, our primetime talk show, Smart Money, used to be about finance. Now it's all about startups, technology, career, things that young people are really interested in.
Wow.
What's the next thing out there?
Right.
And also this idea that it's about small business here. I mean, what is Vietnam? Vietnam is not a country of large businesses. It's a country of millions of thriving small businesses.
Right.
So we're trying to put more attention, more effort onto that part of it. Again, people can feel it, they can touch it, and they get excited about it.
Wow.
They may not have a small business, but certainly their uncle, their cousin, their mother, their father, they all do. So they're connected to it. So it's relevant for them.
Right. What's been some challenges that you've had in since you've come?
I'd say the biggest challenge that we have as a channel, and this will not change anytime soon, is that we are a small guppy in a big ocean.
Okay.
And the big ocean is the fact that, again, this advertising market is 75 to 80% controlled by two large FMCG companies.
Right.
It is difficult to generate ratings, difficult to generate the data points that advertisers need and want in order to make a buy on a channel that's a non-traditional channel.
Right.
And one of the things that I'm hoping will change is that we're seeing in other emerging Asian markets how advertisers are, instead of going to one destination, that is, go to the largest national channel, get the biggest rating, and that justifies your buy.
Right.
They're getting more sophisticated now, and they're bundling up different media into one package. So they'll take, a Facebook buy, they'll take a Google Ads or AdWord buy, they'll combine that with a few cable television buys, and together all of that basket will add up to the same number of eyeballs as you get on a major national channel.
Okay.
But it's far more targeted. That's where I'm hoping that we will go, and that we will be part of that mix, that media mix that's so critical. But we're not there yet. So we face a difficult sell. So we have to go knocking on a lot of doors. We have to introduce the channel. We have to persuade people. And that's a tough sell. So it really comes down to sales.
So what do you respond to advertisers who go, well, where's the data?
We do two things. One is we also help educate advertisers that in Vietnam, just like in many, many markets, ratings data is expensive, so therefore only the largest channels usually can afford it. Secondly, a small channel like us simply cannot afford to pay the very, very high monthly fees for ratings data. It's out there, so if they're an agency or they're a large a Unilever or a Procter & Gamble, they've got the ratings data because they subscribe to it. I'm very, very confident when I actually invite them to look at their own data about our channel. They see it. They receive it from the agencies. So, and we perform at the same level in prime time as other cable channels in our kind of category, which are these national cable channels specialized. So, that in that range, and that's what makes me very excited, is that once people see the data, that we are basically consistent with other similar cable channels, then it goes, great, well, you're in the game. But getting them to actually go make that extra step is tough. And getting them to understand that television is still a very effective medium to communicate in Vietnam. The amount of time that people consume television here is staying very, very strong, 3 to 4 hours per day. And what we're not seeing is the same trend that's happening in other markets where digital is eating into that time. What people are doing for now, according to the research, is they're appendaging on their digital media consumption on top of their traditional media consumption. That will not hold forever like that. It's clear that you have a young population where mobile devices and the web and the mobile web is really grabbing hold. That will eventually eat into the TV. There's no doubt. We know that day is coming. And that's one of the reasons why we're pushing as hard as we can to be on every screen we can, to be there. But for now, people still watch a lot of TV, and that's a good thing for us.
So, but what I'm hearing there, you say, so that people could advertise on broadcast channels where they get a lot of eyeballs, but you have a certain set of eyeballs that advertisers want.
That's it, and that's what makes us special. So if I was pitching you, I would say the buy on FBNC is not a mass buy. It's not about size. It's not about quantity. It's about quality.
Yeah.
So even though we have a small audience, boy, we get the perfect audience for a bank, for a premium car, for airlines, for premium healthcare. You know, certain categories of advertisers, we deliver that audience perfectly. You know, I had a major international bank who said to me, I pitched them, and I said, we're perfect for you. You're selling a premium banking product.
Yeah.
That's who we are. I mean, 100% of our audience is either aspiring to be a premium bank customer or could be a premium bank customer.
Right.
And I said, why are you not advertising in channels like ours? And they said, well, we only advertise on VTV1. And I just shook my head. And I just said, I don't understand. VTV1, you know, caters to the whole market. So 98% of that market is not who you want. They said, well, it's ratings. It's all about ratings. They get the highest ratings. And I was like, ugh. So changing that mindset, getting advertisers and clients to be more understanding of the niches that exist here and how to understand that just because you have the highest ratings doesn't mean it's the highest quality audience.
Right.
We deliver a very, very high quality audience for very, very good value, relatively speaking, compared to, say, a big national channel.
Sure. I mean, it sounds like a logical equation to me. You get the right eyeballs.
Well, the difficult thing here is that not all of the decisions, particularly for the international brands, are made here.
Right.
So
okay.
put yourself in that manager, that brand manager's
Okay.
kind of position. They have to convince somebody in Singapore or Hong Kong that this channel that's small, that doesn't have any data points besides a Nielsen research report and, you know, some other kind of data from the web and whatnot that says this is the right thing to do. That's hard for them to justify. It's much easier for them to say, you know, this big national channel's got this amount of eyeballs, great, approved, go.
Right.
That's a difficult thing, and I understand where they're coming from, their life is coming from. But what's interesting is we have almost every single Vietnamese bank.
Okay.
Okay?
That says something.
And that says something. And when I ask our Vietnamese banking clients, I'll say, why do you advertise on FBNC? And they'll say, because I know people are watching this channel. And because they have their ear to the ground.
Sure.
Their decisions are made locally. Yeah. They know in their neighborhoods, they know in their communities that people who matter, their prospective clients, are watching our channel.
Right.
Whereas when the decisions are made internationally, that communication loop is broken.
Yeah.
They don't know. The guy sitting in Singapore, he doesn't know anybody who's watching our channel, which is understandable. So it's a much more difficult sell.
Yeah.
So as more of the buying decisions become local, as this market grows, that will only help us.
Right, great. So what do you enjoy or like about FBNC then?
I have a great team of people. And that is, you know, which is remarkable. When I came to Vietnam, people said, watch out. Here's what people said, mostly white people. Actually, only white people. They said, you can't trust the Vietnamese.
Right.
Can't trust them. They will cheat, rob, and cheat you right up. Okay, that seems kind of strange. You know, I've lived in China for almost 10 years, so I'm used to that kind of weirdness, that cynicism from foreigners. But I was like, okay. And then people told me also that God, getting them to work hard, it's very difficult. Very, very difficult. And I was like, okay, that seems kind of weird because what I see was one of the most industrious, motivated, entrepreneurial, ambitious population. So I was hearing these weird things from foreigners.
Yeah.
That just weren't reconciling with what I was seeing. And then I get into FBNC, and what I find couldn't have been further from the truth.
Okay.
It was exactly 180 degrees opposite. People are working hard, they're dedicated, we have very low turnover. You have to invest an enormous amount of time in your staff and to build the trust. And that's where these other people were wrong, is because I don't think they invested the time to establish the relationships that then created the trust.
Right.
And that's the difference between working here and working, say, in the West, where trust is more institutionally oriented in the West.
Right.
You know, I'm from one institution, you're from another institution. That implies some trust. If you don't trust me as an individual, well, at least you'll trust where we work from. And then there's a different rule of law that's behind that. And there's all different contract law that's behind it. So trust is kind of defined in different ways. Here, trust is much more personal.
Right.
And I think also people are looking at you, especially as the foreigner and the outsider, who comes in, doesn't know the language necessarily, may not be familiar with the culture. And I think they're absolutely right to throw a little bit of a jaded eye to say, what are you going to do for me? So we, as the foreigners, have to prove and demonstrate ourselves in order to earn people's trust. Right. And if you're not competent, well, then you're not going to earn that trust.
Right.
And so, and I think that's a reasonable equation, frankly.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Makes
people are
sense.
going to look at you and say, are you going to make my life better? Are you going to make this company's life better? And are you going to make our team better?
Yeah.
And if you don't deliver on that, well, forget it. I'm not going to trust you.
Right. So I'm guessing my philosophy is that everything rises and falls on leadership. So you've been able to develop your people and put systems, processes in place, and you've created something that you're enjoying now?
I mean, more than enjoying. I mean, I'm one of the lucky people that gets up every morning and, is just excited to go to work every day, because especially in a place like here in Vietnam, where you can't predict what's going to happen 5 minutes from now.
Right.
And that's, whereas in the West, and I've worked a long time in Europe and also in the US, we pride ourselves a little bit on our predictability. We like having that kind of predictable system. We want projects that have a project plan that is down to the hour in terms of deliverables and in terms of expectations. Oh, that's great for efficiency. I'm not actually sure that we're as good as we think we are at doing it.
Sure.
But it's great in terms of a mindset. Here, time is a more flexible concept. And one thing as a Westerner coming into this market, if you bring your Western way of thinking about time here, you will pull what little hair we have left out, and you will just go crazy.
Right.
And you will not be successful.
Sure.
You have to be very, very malleable when it comes to time. And one of the things that I've noticed about working here, more than in other markets, is that you have long periods of quiet punctuated by short bursts of amazing activity.
Right.
And then long periods of quiet and amazing activity. And it's just the rhythm and the pace of how things work.
Right.
And it's in those periods of quiet that a lot of Westerners get thrown off.
Okay.
And they get frustrated and they go, why aren't things moving? Things are moving. They're just having to marinate.
Right.
And certain things
That's a nice
have to
way of
work through a system. People have to get comfortable with it, and it's just a pace of business here that is unpredictable, and you have to be at ease with that unpredictability. And if you can relax on that front, you can be incredibly successful.
If you can get into the rhythm of that.
Which means having no rhythm.
Right.
In some ways. It means releasing yourself of any expectation of rhythm and timing. Things will get done when they get done.
Yeah.
And what I've found is that if I start 5 different projects at once, a lot of people think, well, that's a lot for you to do. Well, no, I don't worry about it, because one slows down, another one can kind of go forward, another one. And that's one way we've been able to move forward. As long as everything is moving forward, as long as the ball is moving down the pitch, we're okay.
Okay.
It's when the ball slows and goes backwards that we have problems, which happens here too, and you just can't get excited. But it's what the unpredictability, it keeps you young. And I love the fact that I have a team who is, when you give them more responsibility, you give them more leadership opportunities, they just drink it up.
Right.
And they rise to the occasion. And that's been something that the young people in this country are famous for, and something they should be commended for, because in a lot of the countries that I've lived and where I'm from, that's not the case.
Right.
The case is just holding on and trying to do as little as possible just to get by in many cases. And here it's the opposite. It's a much more motivated, generation, and I feel that's very exciting.
So in what way would you say FBNC is being innovative?
A couple different things. One, in terms of our flexibility in adapting the content. That's been something that is you don't see as much in other channels. It happens, definitely. We're not alone in doing that.
Right.
But it's not easy to do.
Right.
And if you have a more rigid management structure, then it becomes even more difficult. So one of the ways we've been innovative is kind of freeing up our management to, to think more open, to be more flexible, to be more adaptive, to take risks. And one of the things that I love about my own culture the most, being an American, is we don't look at failure as a bad thing.
Okay.
That is a difficult concept here.
It is.
That is something that is not looked upon very, very favorably in many respects, which is surprising in some sense for a culture that is so entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Is so filled with business risk here, where we talk about the grand opening and the grand closing of stores.
Yeah.
But at the same time, failure here is not something that's celebrated. So one of the things that I kind of work with my staff on is saying, let's give it a try. If it doesn't work, we'll change and do something else. It's not a failure. We'll adapt and we'll do something else. And once they saw, after we tried things and it didn't work and everybody survived and we were still smiling and moving forward, they kind of felt more comfortable with it. So we've created a culture of innovation, of not being afraid of taking small risks. And I like the small risk aspect of it.
Okay.
It's this idea that success comes not necessarily from the big, giant risks, but it's the everyday decisions.
Right.
And it's very exciting to be able to turn on the TV and to see something absolutely new that didn't come out of my brain or didn't come out of my
Right.
other managers' brains. It came out of their brains at the ground level.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we do is I try to get feedback from every level of our company,
Okay.
negative and positive. Now, again, it's a difficult thing in a culture like Vietnam where
They wouldn't be used to that.
they're not used to it, but they're not used to doing it in a individual. I want you to give negative feedback. That's something that just isn't done.
Yeah.
But for me, it's important to not only hear about what we're doing right, but I want to hear about all the different things that can be improved.
Right.
And so we create these games at our company offsites and our company dinners, where we give prizes and awards, and at the different tables we'll have, okay, there's a form with the top 5 things we're doing great, the top 5 things we're doing that we can do is, we can do better. And when you put people in groups and make it a game, then people open up.
Yeah.
And people relax a little bit. Because it's
Great.
not one person saying, this is what I think you're doing wrong, and then either they lose face or I lose face.
Yeah.
But it's a group of people.
Right.
And what we started to do with these offsites, in the beginning people were a little more kind of like, well, that's kind of weird. But after we did them a couple times,
Right.
and they were fun and they saw no negative ramifications
Right.
from it, we actually really celebrated. My HR team and I took all of the feedback, kind of collated and go through it, and it's amazing what you get out of the feedback that you get. And so it's that respect of asking people for their opinions, asking for their contributions,
Right.
making them feel part of the team.
Right.
I also manage in a very different way. I have a truly open door policy.
Okay.
Whereas in a lot of Vietnamese companies, the general director and the top person is not somebody that certain levels of people in a company would feel comfortable walking into their office and kind of sitting down and saying, I want to brainstorm.
Yeah.
And I've tried to kind of foster a culture in our company that says anybody, anytime can come and talk to me.
Right.
For whatever reason.
Yeah.
And if that is something that creates, again, this cross-department communication, it creates a sense of let's solve problems quickly, let's be open about our communication, and let's move on. Failure is okay if we just learn something from it each and every time.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. So if you were talking to leaders in Vietnam in the media space, what would you like to say to them?
Well, I mean, if I was talking to leaders in the space here, I would actually I wouldn't say anything to them. I would be asking them for insight, guidance, help. I'm very humble in front of them because this is a very complicated media market.
Sure.
This is a very, very sophisticated media market. People oftentimes on the outside make an assessment that this is still a poor country without a very sophisticated media environment, which is not true.
No.
This is one of the fastest growing YouTube markets. There's some amazing social networking innovations that are happening here. There's a great startup community here. The TV market is incredibly complicated and incredibly competitive.
Right.
You've got a newspaper market that is still vibrant. I mean, struggling but vibrant. You know from the magazine business that there's tons of publications. Not all of them are profitable, but some are.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on here, and I would not pretend that I know more than the people who have been doing it for a long time. So I would take advantage of that opportunity to kind of pick their brains and keep finding out and keep learning.
Right.
Because the minute in a market like this that you become cocky,
Sure.
the minute that you think you've got it figured out,
Yeah.
you get eaten alive.
Yeah. Sure.
And we've seen in China, that went through a very similar type of development from, nothing to an amazing vibrant market very quickly. The cocky ones got eaten, got destroyed. And so humility is incredibly important here. It's important everywhere, but particularly here, it's very important.
Excellent. So if you were talking to some young people who are wanting to enter in the TV space, what would be your advice to them?
It's funny because I have an opportunity to talk to journalism students quite a bit.
Okay.
And my advice for young Vietnamese is no different than my advice when I was teaching graduate journalism in Paris at Sciences Po or teaching at the American University, which is you have to want to tell stories. You have to want to be a storyteller.
Okay.
That is, if you don't want to tell a story, then you've chosen the wrong profession. And in order to tell compelling stories, you actually have to train. And I use the example of, here I'll use, Messi from the English Premier League, or I'll find a superstar in the US, in basketball, LeBron James, Yao Ming, whatever. None of these professional athletes got to their level just by showing up on
Sure.
Sunday and playing.
Sure.
They spent 15 years training at the highest level every day, 7 days a week, 3 to 5, 6, 7 hours a day.
Right.
And I always tell the young people that if you want to be a professional journalist, again, here or anywhere else, your training is reading.
Right.
So whereas Messi goes out and runs and does weights and trains on the pitch, for us as journalists, it's reading.
Right.
It's reading books, it's reading the internet, it's reading magazines, it's reading everything.
Right.
So that when you sit down with somebody, as you're doing with me, you actually have something to say.
Right.
You have interesting questions,
Yeah.
you have context, you have analysis.
Yes.
Journalists, unfortunately, in most countries, even here, are people who know a little bit about everything and nothing about anything.
Okay.
And it's a plague of our business. And so the young people who really want to get ahead quickly, I always encourage them to read and to be curious.
Right.
And now the second part is when I was coming up, I sound old when I was doing that, 25 years ago when I was starting out,
Yeah.
if you wanted to work in media, you had to actually work in media.
Okay.
You had to work at a radio, at a TV, at a newspaper if you wanted to have that experience.
Yeah.
But today you don't need that.
Uh-huh.
Today, there's no reason why a young person shouldn't have a blog, a podcast, a social
Right.
community network. They can do everything.
Yes.
And then that's what demonstrates their ability to storytell. They don't need
Right.
permission
Right.
from an established news organization
Wow.
to give them, an opportunity.
That's
So
very
I'll always
powerful.
tell young people saying, what are you doing? Well,
So-
I'm trying to get a job. No. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get a job. Well, you're obviously not up for it because if you don't come to me showing that you're engaged in social media, showing that you know how to use various social media tools, or you understand how to use the web, or you actually are creating content and telling stories, well, my interest level's gone down quite a bit. At France 24, I made it a point that if you didn't have a Twitter and a Facebook account, you didn't get hired by me.
Right. Okay.
Period, end of story. So any journalist that comes in that says, I don't know Twitter that well, then you can't work in this news organization
Right.
because this news organization uses Twitter immensely to follow breaking news and to follow stories and narratives that are not necessarily conventional.
Right.
So you're just not properly
Wow.
qualified.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell young people here where, again, they have the opportunity to create Zing pages, to create Facebook communities, to create their own blogs, to tell stories with video, tell stories with audio. They can do a lot of things just all on a phone. We're not even talking that they need a lot of equipment.
Right.
One simple, 1 million VND phone is all that they need.
Yeah.
A Samsung
Right.
5, not the
Yeah.
S5, but the 5, which
Yeah.
is about 1 million to 1.2 million VND, has a camera, a voice recorder, a keyboard, everything that you need to be as innovative as you want.
Wow. That's
So there's
powerful.
there's no price barrier here
Yeah.
for most people.
Yeah.
For most people. But again, and then that same phone is your gateway to reading.
Yeah.
It's your gateway to all of the different things that I would want to see as a prospective employer of what a young journalist should be doing.
Right.
That's the same advice universally.
That's beautiful. Where do you see television media in Vietnam in 10 years?
I think television's dead and dying. I mean, and that shouldn't be a controversial statement.
Right.
We know it everywhere. I was speaking at a local school here about 6 months ago, and in front of the class of Vietnamese young people, I said, "How many of you watch television?" And they all kind of looked at me with a very perplexed kind of look. They weren't sure what my question was.
Right.
I said, no. I said, how many of you watch television? And again, I got this kind of dead look back from them, and I was like, okay, am I just getting? I don't know what was happening here. And then I know. Okay. How many of you watch that black box on the wall that your parents watch every night? And they go, oh, that? Yeah, no, we don't watch that. I said, how many of you watch your mobile phone, your computer, any of your tablet, any of that? Every hand went up.
Right.
So television, in their minds, was video.
Right.
They don't watch the black box on the wall. They consume enormous amounts of video.
Right.
Whether it's on their phone, the tablet, PC, whatever that is, with their friends and whatnot. And that's a generational shift, by the way, that puts Vietnam right in line with every other market in the world. That same trend is happening in the US, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in Africa, it's happening everywhere.
Okay.
There is a generational cliff in television.
So what will your space look like then?
Well, think
What
about
will
10
SBNC look like?
impossible to tell only because 10 years ago we didn't have YouTube.
Right.
Can you believe it?
Yeah.
YouTube launched in 2005, I think is about, 2005 was the launch of YouTube. The web itself is only 20 years old. So now to ask to forecast 10 years out from now, impossible. And it's not even able to predict what it will be.
Right.
We will have video, People love
Yeah.
moving pictures and stories, and they
Right.
love information. So we know we'll have video. How they consume that video will be entirely on demand with
Right.
massive amounts of bandwidth, even in a market like here.
Okay.
They will get anything that they want, anytime, on demand, at any point in history. The archives will all be there.
Right.
So that's another part of it. So that much we do know. How they consume their content will look nothing like it is today.
Okay.
So the idea that conventional, traditional television will still be the same business, there's no way. That's when I say television's dead. That traditional model is dead.
So how would one make money in that context then, in terms of providing content?
We don't know yet. And because Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message, so the medium will define in many ways how we make money. I mean, if I told you 10 years ago that Google would be making,
Right.
50 billion a quarter, whatever they're making a quarter, something ridiculous. I mean, backing
Sure.
truckloads of money up into their offices
Yeah.
in Silicon Valley. You wouldn't have believed me from those little text ads
Yeah.
on the side of a search page. I mean,
Right.
you wouldn't have believed it. So I'm open to the idea, the unpredictability, that there's going to be all sorts of new spaces that are out there.
Right.
I mean, Facebook didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have to be open. We as a content company must be as flexible as water.
Yeah.
That says no matter what comes up, our content can go here, it can go there, it can go there, it can go anywhere.
Right.
So wherever the opportunity to distribute the content comes up, we'll take it. The traditional gatekeepers of content, cable carriers, satellite companies, their power will diminish because the ability of the web and the internet to distribute content to all corners will increase. We'll have new gatekeepers. Maybe mobile phone companies
Right.
will be new gatekeepers. But so we're seeing in the U.S. now, that the web is not as open as everybody thought it was.
Right.
Because now the ISPs are the gatekeepers. Now the Comcasts of the world are gatekeepers.
Yes.
So the world does not necessarily get easier or more simple.
Yeah.
New, entrenched powers take over from the old entrenched powers.
Yeah.
But we as a content company must be flexible. We cannot hold on to the same business model.
So is that how you
forever.
define yourself then? A content company?
Correct. So one of the things when we rebranded the company, we worked with an excellent branding agency here, and I kept talking about content. And the branding agency said, it's funny, you've never mentioned TV in our discussions. And a lot of the brands of TV channels in this market, VITV, HTV, VTV, all have TV in them.
Wow.
And I look at
That's
ourselves as
interesting.
we're not a TV channel, so our logo is literally FBNC with two kind of windows. Now,
Is that what they are?
They
Windows?
could be screens. They could be portals to knowledge and
Portals.
information. They could be, they could be lots of different things.
Right.
But it's not defined to a platform like television.
Right.
We're not a television company.
Was those windows something that you came up with, or was
It
it
was
they already there?
Well, no. It was something that we, together with the branding agency, collaboratively developed. But it was this idea that it could be multi-screen, it could be different ideas,
Okay.
it could be an exchange of cultures, it could be an exchange of views, it could be lots of different things that two overlapping windows can kind of mean. A window allows you to see in and out.
Yeah.
It allows light to come in and out. It
Yes.
allows lots of things to come
Yeah.
in and out.
Yeah.
But we also like the idea that it was a multi-screen type of branding. And so we are not FBNC TV.
Right.
We are FBNC, a content and media company.